Good evening and welcome to Woman. Our topic this evening is affirmative action. To be more specific, affirmative action in business. With me tonight is Barbara Boyle Sullivan, president of Boyle Kirkman Associates. Boyle Kirkman Associates is a management consulting firm that specializes in helping companies develop programs to better utilize women. Their client list includes such companies as Mobil Oil, Avon, Pillsbury, and Brown & Williamson Tobacco Company. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sandra. It's nice to be here.
Some people think it's ridiculous to continue arguing the question of whether women should work or not. How do you feel about that?
I agree. The facts of the matter are that women are working. In fact, there are over 33 million women working, and they're 40% of the workforce. It's also interesting to see that a third of the women with children under 6 are working today.
Barbara, what made you begin all of this consulting firm? What made you aware that corporations needed advice?
Well, I was in IBM and had an assignment there working for the chairman of the board to set up a program to better utilize women within that company. And the program worked, and we had a significant increase in the number of women managers. Then when I went back into the field as a marketing manager, I found out that other companies were saying, well, come help us. You know, you've made all the mistakes now and we need you. So I took vacation days, went out and helped them, and found out that the same things that apply within IBM could apply to other companies, and it certainly was rewarding to see the results. So basically I ran out of vacation days and saw that it was a very worthwhile thing to do.
You have a business background, and your partner Sharon Kirkman also does. Have either of you experienced discrimination?
Yes, we certainly have. I think that I was very unaware of discrimination. However, I was probably a part of the problem, and I was brought up very traditionally, and so I just knew what a, quote, woman's place was. I remember one time I wanted to go into sales and applied for the job and was told, well, our customers really won't accept a woman in this industry. Perhaps selling typewriters, yes, but not computers. And I just accepted the fact instead of really being more assertive and selling myself for the job.
You worked in Europe for a while.
Yes, I did, 3 years.
How is it there compared to here?
That's very interesting. Women are utilized in Europe in many of the fields, many of the areas that they're not utilized here. I think many of the companies or many of the countries have had a need for talent, so that they have used women in research and some of the more scientific areas. However, even in Europe and in Eastern Europe, women are not heads of companies, and very rarely are they heads of government.
How are they utilizing them in ways that we aren't? Can you come up with some examples?
Well, certainly in the professions, the doctors, the lawyers, they have very high research positions. Women are encouraged to go into the scientific disciplines more than they are here. Also in the production fields, and so many of those production jobs certainly pay more and give women the experience that they need to get ahead, so that, again, because of a need of, a people resource, that those countries have utilized them in many other what we consider non-traditional ways.
Lots of us aren't terribly familiar with the federal laws regulating job discrimination. Can we review those a little bit?
Well, there are 3 basic laws that affect organizations, and especially industry today. First, there's the Equal Pay Act, there's the Civil Rights Act, and then there's an executive order, 11246, which was revised to concern women, commonly known as Revised Order 4. Equal pay is very simple. It just says that women must get the same salary for doing the same type of work. There are different implications there, though. So many companies say, well, we pay women the same for doing the same job. However, there's a problem in titles. For example, in so many companies, women are called accounting clerks, and the men are called accountants, and yet the women are doing the same kind of work, but in a different level. The Civil Rights Act is very interesting, and that just says that companies cannot discriminate as far as promotion and hiring and practices. And there have been some interesting things that have happened lately. Up until just recently, women were suing and receiving settlements based upon the fact that they bid for jobs and were turned down because they were women. But the AT&T case was very interesting in that the money was paid to women who had not bid for jobs but were discouraged from bidding for those jobs because they were men's jobs. And then the third one, Executive Order, Order 4, that's administered by the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, and that just says if a company has federal contracts that they have an obligation to not discriminate, to treat employees fairly. And there have been many significant government contracts that have been held up because companies have not been able to prove that they have not discriminated.
You're in such a good position to know what's going on. Do you feel that we need more legislation, or do you feel that what we have needs to be amended?
Well, as far as industry is concerned, I think that the three vehicles just have to be enforced more, not only from a federal standpoint, but from a state and local government area.
How do states enforce it now?
Well, certainly these laws apply, and that, for example, there are state contracts, and that the state also has the ability to come in and to look at a corporation situation before the company can get any sort of a state contract, but some states enforce it much stronger than others. In New York City, for example, there's Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has a staff of lawyers, and she was doing an excellent job. In some other areas of the country, many companies will say, well, it won't happen here, especially if there's been a conservative state or local government.
Do you get the impression that women are getting really impatient about this?
Yes, it's been very interesting for us to see the difference in the last 6 months as we travel across the country. That I think in the beginning the women's movement appealed primarily to radicals, but now it's affecting every single woman, and even the grandmothers back in accounting are saying, you know, why not me? I've trained my 6th boss and I know I'm better. So it's very interesting. Many women are certainly going to the government, are certainly suing, but many other women are getting together within the company and are saying, well, let's help. Look at all the men up there, they don't understand the problem, let's have a task force and let's get very much involved. And that sounds very good, except that it starts very positively. However, it changes, and when the women realize how bad it is, and when they talk to some of those supervisors and find out why they can't have those jobs, it turns extremely negative. And I can name at least 20 companies where women have band together and have caused pressure within the company. One vice president said just recently that disruption from within is worse than disruption from without. So let's do something now while we can do it the way we want to and while we still have credibility.
That was his reason for doing it, but what are the most predominant reasons? Why are they doing things now, all of a sudden?
Well, I'd have to say, number one, to be realistic, it's the government, and it's the pressure just being forced by the government. Not only these 3 acts, but some of the implications that they are causing. For example, Bank of America has now agreed that 40% of their promotions will go to women. Many other companies have had to agree to hiring goals of 1 out of every 2. Some companies, General Electric, for example, has spent 2 years just trying to come up with their defense, so that many companies are saying, again, let's do it our way before we're forced to do it with goals or with some pressure. Other companies because of the women, some other companies because of consumerism. They sell to women, so they should really do right by women.
It's a PR thing, really.
Well, some companies have made some very bad mistakes with women's products, where in the advertising, for example, many in the literature, companies have talked down to women because a woman has not been there to even recognize that she is being talked down to. So it's certainly PR, but also a realization that they need the women's talent. I think that gets us into perhaps the strongest motivation for any company doing it, and it's really utilization of talent. That, especially now in this kind of an economy, many companies are saying we have to utilize every resource. We're perhaps not replacing some jobs, or we might be laying off, and that there are women working for us, and we're not getting the most out of the women who are working for us. So it's to our advantage to set up affirmative action. Also, that companies have to have goals and objectives, and now they can't afford to make mistakes. They have to identify the women who do have the talent, and there's a problem in identifying this talent. Many other companies are saying that let's not just look today, tomorrow, let's look 3 years out. Let's look at the way times have changed. In the past, we've been able to do with male talent only, but now the competition and the changes in technology are such that we have to have the best talent. If one only looks at half the population and goes in that male barrel for talent, one has to go deeper than if one started to pick the cream of the crop and utilize the other side.
Who usually calls you from a corporation and says whatever they say? I presume they say help.
I wish they did. For the most part, we're calling on corporations and we're making sales calls. However, so often or frequently, women within the company realize there's a problem. They don't want to get involved in coming up with the solutions because they're in an area they like. They want to do their own job. They want to progress, but they want the corporation to do something that perhaps they've read some literature and they want to go get the experts. So number one, they'll perhaps write to the president and say, we want to meet with you. We want to discuss this matter. They'll get together with the president. The president will then say, well, what do you recommend? And then they will start to go out, and many times they call us in and then we meet with the president and sell some of our services.
Well, why aren't these companies doing it for themselves?
That's interesting. Basically, they're buying our experience, that we have been specializing in this field for 4 years, and so they're saying we have made the mistake, so we can utilize that kind of experience.
Do you think they can do it? I mean, do you think they could do it if they really wanted to even?
Yes, but it would take more time. I think really they're bringing us in from a dollar standpoint, that it's cheaper. They don't have to spend as much time reinventing the wheel. Reinventing programs, or the setup time is much smaller when we come in. Also minimize from a minimizing risk standpoint. For example, if one runs a training session for men or women, the first one has to be good. We can't really experiment, so that rather than running one themselves and then changing it, they say, well, we've done it for 4 years, so we can utilize that kind of experience. Also, I think many companies are saying there's something to the outside objective viewpoint. Many organizations or within a company, such as personnel, they have been trying to do this, and that has just been falling on deaf ears. But because we're credible, we have worked with many corporations, that so often top management will listen to us rather than listen to the voice within the company.
I know what some of the specific problems are, but I'm interested in hearing you say what exactly you think the problems are.
Well, the basic problem is our culture and tradition. It's the way we were all raised. And that has affected really 4 areas within a company. It's affected the system in that informally there are men's jobs and there's women's jobs. And it's affected the way a company recruits, or where a company recruits, the advertising, etc. I put that under the system. It certainly affected the managers, that many managers have been taught to take care of their sister. She's different. And now when women come into the company, they take care of her. They protect her from some of those, quote, dirty jobs or pressure jobs. The culture and tradition has also affected the women, and we're part of the problem, that many of us have not aspired, have not developed ourselves for some of the high jobs. And it's also affected the executives, in that many of them think that it's a societal problem, it's not a business problem, so they've delegated it, or they say it's going to really solve itself in 20 years. So the point is that if the basic problem is culture and tradition, it has affected these 4 areas, that if a company really wants to do something about it, they have to set up a program to change the system, to work with the executives so they not only get committed but get involved, to certainly do something about the manager's attitudes and how those attitudes affect their behavior, and then also to work with the women.
How much hostility and skepticism do you run into?
Oh, not that much. I think times have really changed. I think in the beginning people really questioned whether women could do the job, and now I think they're saying affirmative action is a way of life. But how do we do it? I think so many companies are just asking for help. So many managers are asking for help. They intellectually realize that women do have talent, but now they say, well, we have problems communicating. How can we tell whether a woman is career-minded or not? I'm afraid to tell it like it is. I think she's going to cry. Or, you know, can you tell us what we can or cannot do in interviewing a woman? So many companies are saying just help rather than being so hostile and against it.
Let's talk about some specific things you do. After the phone call, what happens next?
Well, the first thing we do in working with a client is we have to define the problem. And I think that's one big mistake organizations have made is that they have not really defined the problem. So we go into an organization, we spend some time learning their system, their policies and procedures, analyzing their statistics, and then we go out and interview managers, and we interview women. So often a company has a great set of procedures, except they're not being applied out in the field, especially with the women. It's very interesting. From these interviews, we then make many notes and then come up with an action plan, our recommendations as to what the company should do based upon what they have done, to build on what they've done or revise or change or set up new procedures, etc. And then we give an executive presentation when we meet with the chairman of the board, the president, and the top people in the organization in a 2-hour session. And we say, here's the problem, or here's the situation in your company, here's why you should change it, here are the obstacles in changing it, and then here are some of the solutions.
Are they sometimes startled by the statistics that you give them from their own company?
Oh, extremely so. One vice president last week was just shocked when he saw a salary statistic. He kept saying, well, women in this company have good jobs. But when he saw it broken down that 94% of the men, for example, earn over $10,000 versus less than 5% of the women, he was just shocked. So that they're shocked by statistics. They're also shocked by the comments from their managers and comments from their women. Many executives are truly committed to this subject. They have written the letters. They've said, do it. So they expect it to be done as with everything else they've said, just do. And so when they get these verbatim comments back from managers that say, well, affirmative action is just tokenism in this company, I'll only do it if I see them doing it, or I'll do it when I know it's a priority item, then they say, there's a problem. Or when they see some of the comments, the managers will say, well, given a qualified man and a qualified woman, I'll always hire the man because it's not as much of a risk and I feel uncomfortable with women around. And the executives are shocked. They're also shocked with the women's attitudes. They perhaps have asked some women in the company about the situation, and some women have said, well, I'm very happy. So therefore they assume all women are very happy. And so they're shocked when they see some comments from the women that say just the opposite.
I'd like to know more about what goes on in the awareness sessions that you hold. You have a management awareness, and then you also have one for women, don't you?
That's right. Yeah. The management awareness session is a one-day program with about 20 managers in the session. The objective is not to change attitudes. That's going to be a long time before we'll change the attitudes. But what we try to do is say we want to change management behavior. We just can't say do it, because there's a need for managers to bring out, to understand some of these attitudes so they can change your behavior. So much of the discrimination against women is really unconscious discrimination, so there's a need to bring it out. This session is very practical. It's all case studies, all role play, no lecture at all. I think in the beginning, when organizations had awareness sessions, they made mistakes in that people got together and discussed the matter and said, this is a myth, this is a stereotype. But what we have found is that we have to have real life situations in the classroom, and managers can't intellectualize about the subject. They have to exhibit the same behavior in the classroom that they do way back in their office. And we know from the environment study what the problems are, so we build the case studies so that they're very true to life and that they exhibit that behavior. For example, we have a case study in which there's a very qualified woman, and she's applying for a job, a $30,000 job, and it's an excellent job, 40% travel. The woman has 2 children. So I sit in the center of this U-shaped classroom, and they have an opportunity to interview me. That's very interesting. They know they shouldn't ask these questions, except they're still very concerned about how I take care of the children and what does my husband feel about traveling. And that I answer the questions very confidently. I'm not aggressive. I'm not radical. If I were a man, they'd love the answers right away. But after I finish, I'll ask them, now, how many of you would hire me in this job? And about half would. And I'll say, well, now, why won't the others? And they'll say, well, we don't like you. Is it my personality? No, it's charming. But they say, well, you're too competent and you're too capable and you're just not concerned about your family, at all. And these, of course, they laugh because that's what they always say. Just give me a competent, qualified woman who's not concerned about her family and I'll hire her. And now they have one and they don't. But after they interview me, I then sit down in front of them and they offer me the job. And it's very interesting. As they offer me the job, they will tell me all the bad parts of the job. They'll say, well, now you're going to be the first woman at this level. The men don't want to work with you. The men don't want to work for you. It's 40% travel. You're going to be dragging, your husband around the country or whatever. But anyway, would you like the job? And it's interesting. One person, I guess about 2 weeks ago, was doing this. And then all of a sudden he stopped in the middle. He looked across the room. He saw a man. He said, if that man were sitting here, I would be talking him into the job instead of out of the job. So that's why we call it awareness. It's making managers aware of how their attitudes affect their behavior. And that's all we're trying to do is to
You're doing consciousness raising then a little.
It's consciousness
Although
raising,
you probably
it's
don't
not
want to call it
sensitivity.
that. Yeah.
There's a big difference between the two. I really don't want to change. I can't say I don't want to. I'd like to change their attitudes, but I'm just saying what's realistic is to change their behavior and let them keep their attitudes about their wives, about their daughters, about whatever, but in work, trying to not let those attitudes affect their behavior.
What happens with the women within the corporation?
That's very interesting. We run a 2-day women's awareness program for women. The problems, or let's say the subject matter, treats, number one, some of the women's special problems. For example, many of the women see a conflict between being feminine and being a tough-minded manager. Many of the women have special problems with acceptance. How does one handle an employee who doesn't want to work for her? Many women have problems with other women. Many women say, I don't want to work for another woman. That's an interesting part of the course. We have a little case study about a woman who doesn't want to work for a woman, and we split them up into groups, and they come back with at least 50 reasons why many women say they don't want to work for other women. And
can you give me some examples?
You can imagine women are too emotional. They're too concerned about your personal life. A woman doesn't have any status working for another woman. She's too nosy. She's emotional. So many of them, the myths and stereotypes. But from that, we go into then, someone usually says something about femininity, so then we have them describe what's feminine, and the women will say, oh, it's sweet, lovely, soft, supportive, gentle, and then we'll say, what's masculine? They'll say strong, capable, aggressive, decision maker, and then we'll say, well, what's a good manager? Strong, capable, aggressive, decision maker. And we did that once, and a woman looked at that and she said, good heavens, we've seen the enemy and it's us. We did that. And then some women think a little bit more and they say, my heavens, there's more to it. Maybe some of the reasons why we don't want to go into those other jobs is we honestly believe those things, not only about other women, about us. And we're afraid that other people are going to think that about us. So that's why we don't go into the jobs. An interesting part of the course is when we have women answer a question, how many more years are you going to work? And with a group of men, it would be an easy answer, but women start out until this, until that, and finally somebody subtracts from 65 and says 30 more years, or 35 more years, or 20 more years. Many women for the first time are shocked and say, well,
that has to be very startling.
They say, I might like my job now, but for 30 more years, maybe it's worth it to start to look around and, see the options and then make an intelligent, informed decision.
I think if you're aware of how long you have to go, you think in terms of career more readily than you do job, if you think in terms of that time. Is that a problem that you think is very widespread?
Oh, yes, especially with women. They just think about their current job. They never think of it as giving them experience or development to go on to another job. What's interesting with the course is that after we're finished, so many of the women, as with so many of the men, will decide to stay in their current job. However, they now are much happier and more motivated because it's their choice, rather than being forced into that job by the system. Some other women will see then that, yes, they would like to do more, and they then start to set up career plans and development plans, and then they're more motivated and do a better job in their current job.
There are a lot of companies that seem to be afraid of backlash, and I'm not sure I understand this, if they have a really strong affirmative action program going. So what they seem to do is bury it in their minority program. Now, does that work?
No, that doesn't work. There are two questions there. First, let me treat the last one, which is the whole theory of a separate program for women, a separate program for minorities. We believe that there's one equal opportunity umbrella, which is equal opportunity for all people. However, if that's not being realized, there then has to be a special emphasis program for the people who are not getting equal opportunity. There are many similarities between minorities and women. One similarity being that we traditionally don't treat people as individuals. However, there are many differences too, so that there is a need to treat them from an education standpoint as very different. Many managers will accept the fact that they will have to and could work for a minority man. However, they do not want to work for either a minority woman or a non-minority woman. So that there has to be two emphasis programs within an organization. Your first question, well, there were two parts I thought, and I've lost
Backlash.
the first. Oh, backlash. Many people do explode the area of backlash. In the management awareness session, we have a case study of a woman getting a job, and then I role play one of the men in the company, and I say, well, now, you know, what's going to happen to the white male around here? And it's very interesting. Managers are very able to handle that on a one-by-one or one-on-one situation, because they've handled it when a man did not get a job and another man who was less qualified got the job. They've been able to handle it. So in management awareness, they learned that they can handle backlash on an individual basis, and it doesn't have to be the big problem. I think the big problem with backlash is where companies have not done it the right way. They have set goals and objectives. They have forced managers to put women into the job, and so frequently the women were not capable because the managers had a hard time identifying the, quote, the right women, the women who had the potential to go forward.
Are you hopeful? Do you think things are improving?
Oh yes, I don't know which side to take. If I take the side I'm hopeful, then I'm afraid that'll stop some of the pressure. But yes, especially with the clients we're working with, that when a company is sincere, they are doing things, and there have been numerous success stories. Many of our clients have now had women, or now have women in the non-traditional jobs, in the driving forklifts, managers and purchasing, etc.
Barbara, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching, and good night.